Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bill Brenner, Senior Vice President of Audience Content Strategy here at Cyber Risk Alliance, and I welcome you to this SC Media production sponsored by Trend Micro. And joining me from Trend Micro is Mike Milner, the company's VP of Cloud Technology. We're going to be spending the next hour or so talking about cyber risk as business risk and walking the intersecting lines. But first, a couple of quick housekeeping notes. If you have a question, select the Q&A button that's down below. So the circular buttons below the two to the far left. Click on either of those and ask your question, and I will see it. And whenever I see questions come in from the audience, I will ask them of Mike. Also, there's some material in the handouts button, which is the second to far right button. And so all handouts are in there. And if you go in and you don't see them, just refresh and it should appear. Sometimes that section's a little slow. But with that, let us begin. Mike, welcome.
Bill, happy to be here.
Yeah, happy to have you. Um, so the sorry about that, folks. I'm having my notes just froze on me.
I'm going to
They're now
apologize in advance too, Bill. My neighbor is building a deck, and if you hear any saw noises or hammering noises, that's probably just me.
so all of you in the audience, thank you in advance for your patience on such things. But the topic of this webinar, Mike, is about cyber risk as business risk. Can you just start by talking about that can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. What does it mean to you?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And this theme is something that Trend Micro has been talking about for a while. It was really, we kind of highlighted it at the start of this year as part of our Trend Micro Risk to Resilience World Tour. But this concept
Hmm.
of cyber risk becoming business risk is kind of one of our key messages for this year. And I'll admit, I didn't come up with it. And when I first heard it, I thought it kind of seemed a bit silly. But as I talked to people about it, I realized it's because of my background. I have really only worked in technology companies where it's so dependent on technology from the start that it's kind of obvious that cyber risk is business risk. But for many companies, that's not the case. So the idea that instead of just being, the computers are down, no big deal, it's now become any disruption to your software, your IT, your computer infrastructure has damaging impact to your business. So any risk that exists in that IT environment or your overall enterprise, let's say cyber environment, is now business risk that needs to be managed just like any other business risk. And I think that's the biggest message that we're trying to carry across as part of this theme is that every company now needs to consider cyber risk as part of their overall risk strategy, even if in the past maybe they didn't.
So, are there any companies out there that really, in your view, are they've made that leap to the business risk
Yeah, I
and
think I think
have
there are.
adjusted? So, and more important than which companies they are, talk a bit about what you've seen some companies do that is, in your opinion, the way they need to be moving to be treating cyber risk as business risk.
Yeah, so I think, like I said, there definitely are companies who've really made this transition. And you'll often hear companies talk about it as a digital transformation, where they've actually changed the way that they're doing business in order to take advantage of technology. So I actually have an example here of one of our customers. This is
Excellent.
Summit Carbon Solutions. And this is actually a really cool company. They're capturing carbon, and instead of it going up into the atmosphere and causing climate change, they're capturing it so that it doesn't cause any kind of global warming. There's no climate impact. So a company objectively doing good things for the world, really. Um, and I think this is a company where in the past you would have thought, well, it's not really much of a cyber target. Who's going to hack a company doing this, right? Like it's not Bank of America or somebody handling a lot of money. It's a company doing good stuff. And I think this is one of the things that's really changed over, I'd say maybe the past 10 years. I think the techniques that attackers are using have really shifted. I'd say in the past, before this, a company might be targeted by attackers based on the type of company or the information that they hold, and attackers trying to actually have some outcome on that company, steal some money or something like that. But I think increasingly or almost universally, that technique has changed. Now attackers don't care what the companies are. They don't care about your data. With something like ransomware, as long as you care about your data, then an attacker can go in and encrypt all your files and try to get you to pay back. If you have cloud environments, the attackers don't necessarily care about your data or your servers. But if they get access to that cloud environment, they can spin up their own instances and mine cryptocurrency or something like that. And again, steal money, make money from you. They don't care who you are or what they're doing. So I think this has been one big shift. But for Summit Carbon Solutions, I think another big change, and to be fair, this has changed the whole world, is the big impact of working from home brought on by COVID, really
Mm-hmm.
accelerating that shift to fully distributed workforces. So this became one of their key problems. They're still hiring, they're still growing, but now their employees are scattered all over the place. They have no core network, no hard perimeter, and they've got to protect their employees no matter where they are, no matter whether they're on corporate issued laptops or personally issued mobile devices. It's really kind of become a wild west for a lot of companies, and this was the issue or one of the problems that Summit Carbon Solutions was facing. How do you protect all of these employee devices, even though they're now not in a nice, secure office?
Mm-hmm.
And for Summit, really what they took advantage of is XDR. So extended detection and response. This is part for Trend Micro, part of our Trend Micro Vision 1 platform, where you're really able to look at anything that's going on with these endpoints. So whether that's what somebody's using or doing on their laptop, whether that's any operating system, it's pretty broad support. But the idea is whether it's something that the employee is doing themselves or something that malware might be trying to do on their system, they're now able to monitor all of that behavior and respond to anything that they detect that's considered risky. And by kind of having that capability, it gives them that, let's say, confidence that they have a handle on this risk. Now, Summit Carbon Solutions also has another issue that they're a startup and they're working with a lot of big companies. And as a startup, you have to overcome that initial concern when you're dealing with any big company of can this small company deal with us? Can they protect our data? Can they protect what we're working with them on. And I was a founder of a startup myself, so I know this is a very real issue. And in the case of Summit Carbon Solutions, we worked with them on their cloud environments. So they're handling a lot of data, working with a lot of systems, and they're managing that across cloud environments. So again, taking that same approach, giving the visibility into their environment and that ability to monitor what's going on, and also make sure that they're managing the risk, whether that's on those endpoint devices or in the cloud, in a consistent way. So that's, I think, a good example of a customer who's really made that shift. They've recognized that they need to manage this risk across not just one area or second area, but across the entire organization, and really manage that risk as a whole, which I think is fantastic.
Now, you brought up XDR.
Hmm.
There's a lot of alphabet soup that's part of the bigger picture. So there's XDR,
Hmm.
there's EDR, there's NDR. How does Trend Micro define each of those?
Yeah, good question. And I'm not what would you call it, an acronym historian, but as far as I understand it, EDR was really a term that started to be used first for specifically endpoint detection and response. And then
Hmm.
NDR is like network detection and response. But at Trend Micro, we've really taken this platform approach. It doesn't make sense to look at your different risks as silos. So endpoints being managed over here and network managed over there. There's even CDR, cloud detection and response. It doesn't make sense to treat these all as silos. So very early on, Trend Micro started using XDR, which kind of just means everything, right? It's really just the DR, detection and response, no matter where that data is coming from. And I think it's important to look at it holistically like that. You don't want to end up with very specific silos because it's the same problems you'd have with any other silo. You can't share data, you can't correlate across different areas. And I think that's one of the key things that companies need to be adept at, right? They need to have that holistic view so they can see the risk across the board, not
Hmm.
just in specific areas. And that's part of the theme behind that. Cyber risk is business risk. It's managing that risk holistically. So XDR is really our answer to that. It's across the board, whether that's endpoints, network, cloud, IoT, I mean, just anything in an enterprise, being able to get all that information in, process it, and find out the things that are strange, suspicious, and action them, respond.
So this is kind of a addendum to the last question. Um, so all of this exists within the cloud. The cloud means many things to many
Mm.
people. How do you look at it in terms of risk?
Yeah, this is a good question. Um, it's a question I deal with a lot. So I've got cloud in my job title, which means people always ask me questions like this. And I think usually in my role, I think of cloud as organizations who are building their own software or infrastructure using one of the major cloud providers, something like AWS or GCP or Azure, where they're building in the cloud. But when you look at an overall enterprise, that is a significant risk, a risk that needs to be managed. But it's not the only use of the cloud that a lot of people think about. So you also have to think of, let's say, cloud-based applications. So if you're using cloud apps, you're not writing the software yourself, but you're using these applications. So this could be something like Salesforce or um, Google applications, things like that, Microsoft Office 365. These are cloud applications that your organization might be using. And just like anything else, you need to manage the risk there as well. Now, some of the risk factors might be, in a sense, outsourced to the person or company running that environment, but you can't
Hmm.
ignore them as part of your overall, let's say, risk management profile. And often we hear about that kind of cloud application with things like shadow IT. I think this is still an issue for companies, but it was maybe more of an issue in the early days. But the idea that customers are working around your corporate controls and they're using cloud apps like Dropbox or something like that without corporate approval. And that was causing a lot of issues early on. I think, like I said, less of an issue now with these cloud apps because they're being a bit more managed by corporate IT and that risk is being managed. But what I hear about a lot now is how do you manage your employees using these AI services like Chat GPT and things like that. So it's a hugely broad area when you talk about the cloud. But I think those are the main categories I group it into. Companies that are building their own services in the cloud and companies that are or using cloud applications.
So I was actually just about to ask about where AI fits into all of this because that's the topic people can't seem to get enough of
Yeah, I
in
don't think you can have a
2023.
conversation without talking about AI.
So talk about that, where AI fits in. You mentioned generative AI, but when it comes to, security in the cloud, where do you see AI's place for better or for good or bad, really?
Mm. So when I get asked about AI in general, it's usually from two directions. Okay, Trend Micro, security company. First is, are hackers using AI? So is AI going to make this huge wave of attacks possible or huge volume of attacks that we have not seen in the past all of a sudden now will be available? And then from the other perspective of defending, are you using AI to protect us from attackers? And Trend Micro has research teams around the world, and we consistently look at attacker use of AI. And there's definitely been articles on things like fraud GPT and different variations where somebody's taken some of this technology and used it to do harm. But largely, we're not seeing, let's say, a massive shift in behavior from attackers. In a sense, what it has enabled potentially is more efficient hacking for these adversaries. So things like business email compromise. So when you're generating an email and you want it to look like a certain speaker or be written in a certain language, maybe these emails can be drafted more quickly, more authentically. They look more authentic.
Mhm.
So I think these things are definitely happening, but we haven't seen a big groundswell of attacks. And I'm not saying it will never happen. Of course, this technology is incredibly hard to predict where it's going, but I don't think people need to be fearful of attackers' use of AI at this stage. But like anything, I think preparedness is a good idea, which is why we do talk about detection, response, and attack surface risk management. You making sure your defenses are strong. That works whether the attack is coming from good old humans or assisted by AI. And then, sorry, I'll pause there. I've talked for a bit before I go into the defender side of things.
Yeah, because I did want to ask. Um, a lot of risk is managed with insurance, obviously.
Hmm.
Um, in the cyber realm, is cyber insurance the answer, the needle mover, or is that overstated?
Uh, I think for a period that was the answer or the path a lot of companies took. When you think about business risk, most of that risk can be managed by insurance. But I think what we've been observing is that insurance works because you've got the underwriting, right? You've got teams of really smart people who are looking through reams of data, and they know that if you look at something like life insurance, if you're a smoker versus a non-smoker, they know what difference that might make on your the length of time you're going to live, right? Because they've got
Hmm.
enough data and they understand that data. But what we've been finding with cyber insurance is, or I should say, what we've been observing insurance companies noticing is that they're actually currently either not enough data or they're not good enough at analyzing that data. So the payouts for cyber insurance have tended to be quite large. And if you look at an application for cyber insurance, the questionnaire is, from a technical perspective, you look at it and you think, I don't think they're capturing what they need to capture here to quantify that risk. And I think cyber
Hmm.
insurance companies are realizing that they don't have a good handle on the underwriting for cyber insurance. It's either moving too fast, or they don't have enough data, or they're not understanding that data well enough. And what we're seeing is a lot of cyber insurance policies are not being renewed. So companies who might have had cyber insurance policies in the past are now no longer able to renew them. And new companies aren't able to secure cyber insurance at all. So I think maybe given enough time, and what often happens is the insurance companies themselves start to be more strict by defining what controls they will insist on before they will grant insurance. So over
Hmm.
time, this might evolve and insurance will start to become more of a, let's say, a usable solution, but I don't think it's a universal solution at this time.
Got it. All right, let's move on to the defenders.
Mm. Yeah, so back to the AI side for defenders. I think this is an area
Hmm.
where we're going to see a lot of rapid growth, which I think is going to be very positive. One of the things quite recently that was announced, DARPA, who famous for inventing a lot of things, they announced at Black Hat that they were launching an AI cyber challenge. So over a 2-year period, trying to get researchers and hackers to use AI to defend networks and software. And it seemed like the focus is primarily on software defects. So using AI to analyze the software that we depend on every day, whether that's software we use, companies use, or infrastructure, power generation, all that kind of core stuff. Looking at all that software and seeing if AI can be used to secure it, basically, make it more secure either by fixing defects, kind of managing the risk, or detecting attacks. So, kind of that XDR side of things, detecting attacks and responding to them. At Trend Micro, we look at AI as a very exciting avenue for investment. So one of the things we've released recently is, I think, adjacent to defending against attacks. So if you look at our Vision One platform, we've got a huge amount of data coming in, being analyzed, and we pull out the things that are interesting from a security perspective. But it's a massive amount of data in there that can be accessed by anyone in a SOC, a CISO, anyone looking to answer a question. But it can be complex to access that data. You have to understand maybe a bit more than we'd like in order to pull that data out if you're not a skilled user. So
Yeah.
this idea of an AI companion is something that we've launched recently where you can use AI to ask a question of your system in natural language, and then let the generative AI kind of answer that question based on the data in your system, or guide you through how to do something based on your query. So I think this is an excellent first step. It's helping our customers be more productive, use our software in a more powerful way. It's not quite, using AI to spot attackers' bad behavior and bad things and flag those up. We have been using machine learning and other types of advanced analysis to do this for years. But I think this generative AI, in the case of our companion, is one of the most exciting new changes that's kind of come up in the, let's say, the defense realm, helping customers make better use of the systems that they have already from Trend.
Got it. So we've talked about cloud environments. We've talked about endpoints, where AI fits in, XDR. Talk about what else you're seeing, because I know you have a couple more case studies there, and I want to get at the next one.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I remember your point earlier about alphabet soup. So I think first let's look at the next case study. This is again another company doing good stuff. Oh, too far. Where am I? Okay, here we go. ADEC Innovations. So this is a company who, and again, I've started a startup, and when you're a small company, you can make very strict controls. You can keep things reined in. But no matter how reined in you keep things, eventually you're going to reach a point where you introduce something new to an environment, and then you'll have to manage it. And for ADEC Innovations, this has been through their rapid growth. They've been acquiring a lot of companies. And an acquisition is kind of the, I think, one of the worst case scenarios for risk management, because you've got this company who you've done due diligence on, but you can only go so deep at that phase. And once they're acquired, at that moment, you have to own and manage all that risk. And on top of that, you've had no say in how they've built their systems, what technology they've used, what infrastructure. So for ADEC Innovations, they've had all of these acquisitions, and each acquisition using different technology stacks, different types of technology. And they've now they've grown into this decentralized IT system, right? Where different parts of the company had different bits of technology, different types of platforms, and they really wanted to get a handle on it all. And they wanted to know that they were kind of being secure across the board, even though they were dealing with a lot of different types of technologies. So we worked with them again on our Vision One platform. So looking at all of the different data, pulling in from all of these different IT environments. So that kind of gave them that single view of the data, right? Everything is coming into one view, so it can be managed in one place. But they also had the difficulty, which not unique to them, we hear this constantly from customers in every different industry, is that it's really hard to find security skills, IT talent, security resources to implement and manage a lot of the security systems and security methods that companies know they need to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
With ADEC Innovations, they wanted to work with us on a way that they could get all that value that we just talked about with the previous case study on Vision One XDR, managing that attack surface. They wanted all that benefits, but they didn't have the human resources, the security skills to do it all themselves. So with ADEC, they were looking at actually our managed XDR. So this is the idea that, Trend Micro, we really know how to use our own systems because we've built them. we know how they work, we know how to make optimal use of them. So if a company's taken that step to use these systems, then we can, on top of that, offer them a service where we will help them manage it. And what form that takes depends on how much help they want. But in general, what you're getting is an expert in the system. People at Trend Micro, we've got a whole team of people or teams that kind of can help manage, maintain, run these systems for you, so that you don't have to
Hmm.
take your own security staff and put them on this. So it's a good way, in case of ADEC Innovations, to augment what you're already doing, leveraging some of the deep skills that Trend Micro has with our own systems. So this is a good way that they were able to get a lot of the benefits that we talked about before, even though they couldn't at that moment get all the security resources that they needed to make it happen. So
Hmm.
I think I like this case study because we often hear, yeah, I know what I need to do, or we know we want to invest here, but we just can't. We don't have the people to run this. So this is a great case study because it helps companies answer that question. This could be something temporary. Maybe, we've got someone new, maybe they'll grow and be able to take this over, or we want to bring this in-house in a year. But it now gives you that flexibility to start getting the benefits of the technology without needing to take the resources away from something else.
So all of this makes me wonder, when we're talking about managed security, where do you see the line in terms of who's responsible for what? Because I think that that is something that the players are never entirely clear on.
This is also something that can vary. It was another customer who we actually, I can't say their name, but I was speaking to their CISO, and the way he described it really hit home for me. Is in their case, they had the staff, they were managing these
Mhm.
systems, but they didn't have, or they were worried, I should say, about retaining the staff. They didn't want to overload their staff. So they actually used our managed solutions just to handle critical incidents, so that if something happened on a weekend or in the middle of the night, it wouldn't immediately start paging one of those in-house resources. It would go to our managed team, who could do an evaluation, determine if it was critical and could be responded to according to a predefined playbook. Thereby, you don't have to wake up anyone. Or if it was something that actually did legitimately need to be handled by an in-house team. So this is a
Mhm.
way that that company could still use their internal resources to manage the day to day, but leverage Trend Micro to help manage some of these out of hours, to help their own staff literally sleep more soundly at night. So I think that's a great example of where this kind of flexibility can be quite powerful. You can use us for more or less depending on where your needs are. But I do 100% agree with you. It needs to be well defined. So you need to have a firm understanding of, whether it's time of day based or criticality based, of when something will be handled by your managed solution provider or when it will be handled by your own team.
Got it. So, um, let's talk now about the attack surface, because we've been talking about the solution to
Mm.
dealing with the attack surface, but I feel like we should spend some time talking about what the attack surface looks like from your perspective right now, and how everything we've discussed up to this point really fits into that.
Yeah, so I love using analogies. And when when I think of in Trend Micro, our Vision One platform, but really just in general, there's really two big categories that security needs to think about. One is we've talked about before, XDR, forget the acronyms, but the detection and response concept. And the other is kind of your preparation in advance of that. And like I said, analogies I love. I think of it like a castle, right? If your castle has no walls, when you get attacked, the attacker is just going to walk right in. So before you get attacked, you need to build your walls. And I think of that as kind of managing your attack surface, managing that risk. In different kind of silos, it's called different things. In the cloud, we'd probably say cloud security posture management, or in enterprise, ASR, attack surface risk management. But effectively, you're raising your defenses, right? You're building a hard environment. You're taking steps in advance to make yourself a harder target for attackers. You're building those walls. In Trend Micro, we think of that as that attack surface risk management. And then when you are attacked, that's where you've got your soldiers on top of the walls and they're, stopping the attacker, they're defending. So you need to make sure that they have walls to stand on, that those walls are strong and secure, that they don't have like lots of holes in them. And that will make it much more, you'll be on much better footing to defend when you are attacked. So those two big things, I think, preparation for an attack, that attack surface risk management, and then responding to an attack, detecting it and then responding to it. I think those are the two big aspects in security. And I think historically, industry has spent more brain power, more thinking on the attack and defend aspect, right? Like the soldiers on top of the walls. But I think this is shifting, and it's really been a focus of Trend Micro to focus to really address this attack surface risk management. And I've actually got another slide here. So we talked about a couple aspects here, endpoints, your laptops, your mobile devices. We talked about cloud environments, your AWS, Azure, GCP. We talked about working from home, but this attack surface just grows and grows and grows. OT is something that we haven't really talked about at all. But I think increasingly, this is almost a hallmark of this concept of cyber risk becoming business risk. There's another large company we've worked with who I can't use their name, but you're using or you're seeing technology more and more in critical environments. In this case, it was manufacturing. It used to be maybe IT was used to manage what work is being done, but more and more OT or operational technology is actually running the equipment. So if that technology is disrupted, hacked, just any kind of problems there, it actually stops production. So again, this is business risk. This can affect the core of how your company operates. So this attack surface, really, to do it properly, needs to look at everything in an organization, every aspect. And at Trend, we believe all of this information, we talk about this as sensors, right? You want sensors within all of these areas, pulling information together so that you can detect and respond to incidents, no matter where in your attack surface something might be happening. And like I said, this is, I think, kind of newer to industry. Certainly, Trend Micro didn't invent the concept, but it's been a huge investment for us. And we think for our customers, this is showing a lot of value for them. It's kind of bringing that same single pane of glass that everyone talks about, but it's really bringing that information together. And this is really important because if you manage it separately, then you're going to end up with separate silos of priorities. This over here, we think this is secure. This over here, we think this is secure. But you're not looking at the interplay between the two. And I think if nothing else, enterprises and technologies and everything in this attack surface diagram, what's clear is that all of this is becoming more and more interconnected. And I think it's impossible to look at these things separately and still be effective at managing security. It has to all come together. And that's part of our core message that we're really spreading with this cyber risk to business risk.
So how do you prioritize which
Mhm.
risks to address first?
Yeah, that's always the question. And I think I've got a bit of a contrarian opinion here. So I've actually got another slide I like. Let me just pull it up here if I can. So assess risk, prioritize remediation. I think from a attack perspective, you're responding to an attack, it makes sense to just respond to the highest risk. But when we look at attack surface, you're not necessarily being attacked right now. So in this diagram, you see what credential dumping activity. Um, that's something actively happening. It's red. You're responding to that. Then other things
Mhm.
aren't actually being attacked necessarily. They're just a risk that exists. And the contrarian part of it is a lot of people tell me, you should always start with the highest risk and work your way down. But in my opinion, you have to balance your investment with the return from that investment. So if you've got a lot of these risk scores, even if a lot of them are green, if you can invest very little and lower all of those risk scores with very little effort, then I think that's a very good investment. And I often talk about this from the perspective of teams who are building software. So if you've got a development team who's writing code and they've got a build pipeline and they're building, let's say, container images and publishing those out to the cloud, if you can install a bit of software that can just scan those container images and let you know if there's a known vulnerable open source library and and block that code from being deployed. So you're effectively asking the developers, you're notifying them, hey, you've got a vulnerability here. You need to upgrade to a non-vulnerable library before this can be deployed. That's a very small investment in effort and in probably budget from a security perspective. And it's not going to solve all your highest security, your highest priority risks. But there's a lot of attention on software supply chain. And with this small investment, now you can lower a lot of different risk scores because maybe these build pipelines are feeding a lot of different applications that you're building. So in my mind, when you're looking at attack surface, rather than actually defending against active attacks, instead of just looking at the highest priority risks, it makes a lot of sense to instead look at what will lower the risk with the least amount of investment. That kind of risk ROI, right? How can you get the best return on investment, even if it's not, the sexiest thing, but just by adding a small change, maybe you can cut out a lot of risk. And kind of in the case of software supply chain, there might be a high severity, there might be a new struts 2 or log4j that is critical risk. But by putting this small investment in, you're also prepared for that when it comes along. So that's usually my advice to customers is look at the kind of return on investment and prioritize accordingly.
Very good. So um, from there, and you've given a couple of very good case studies here. Um, what does the makeup look like from your vantage point in terms of among these companies, who is owning this particular risk?
Oh, like who within the organization?
Hmm.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of variability here. So I think in the past, IT risk, security risk tended to be owned by the CISO. They had the ultimate responsibility for, let's say, the security risk in an organization,
Hmm.
or someone in that kind of senior security role. But I think more and more, and I think it makes sense, is risk is personal to each organization. So there's no obvious kind of industry wide answer. I mean, I've got a screen up here showing numerical risk on various things, right? These are really designed to be relative risks. This thing is more risky than this one over here. But how risky this whole thing is to your organization depends on your organization. So, in my opinion, ultimately, because cyber risk is business risk, as we've been talking about for this whole call, I think ultimately that risk should be owned by the business. And the CISO, their job is to convey and explain that risk, not to own the risk decisions, but to make sure that the people who do own these decisions, whether that's the CEO or the board, right? Like the people making business risk decisions, the senior security leader, whether that's the CISO or whatever role title, but their job is to make sure that those decision makers understand the risk, that they understand how it could impact the business, that they understand what different actions might do in terms of this risk. And we believe this is so important that a big part of our platform is really designed to help communicate risk to decision makers. So how do you quantify this risk over here versus this risk over here? Well, that's kind of part of the concept you're seeing on this page here. So if we can help the security leader explain and quantify risk, then we're helping them do their jobs so that the people who own the risk, the business decision makers, can effectively make those decisions for the business. I won't say that every company is like this. There's still quite a bit of variability here, but again, in my opinion, this is the way things are moving.
Got it. All right. Let's see if there are any more questions from the audience. And I am seeing none.
What? No questions?
But
Come on. Come on.
I know, well, it's 2 o'clock on a Thursday, and
Fair, fair.
some
I,
days
I
it's
do
just
look
hard.
out at my
Some
neighbor
days
building their deck and I think, well, I wouldn't mind being out in the sun there as well.
yeah, that's right. But I mean, I think this is a good place to wrap it up. Um, I've enjoyed this discussion immensely, and it's been a long time since I've talked to someone from Trend Micro, so this was great.
No, thank you very much, Bill. I'm just going to throw up an ending slide here with a
Please
standard
do.
QR code, of course. If you want to find out more about the technology that I've talked about, Trend Micro's Vision One platform, you can scan that link and it will take you to our page describing all of the stuff that I've mentioned, plus lots more that's available in the platform. But I want to thank everyone for watching, and thank you, Bill, for hosting.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to Trend Micro for sponsoring this. And thank you to our audience for showing up, sticking around, and hopefully getting some value out of this. I would say they did.
I hope so. I hope so.
So, so have a good rest of your day, everybody. And until next time,